Okay. All right, so again, welcome, and my name is Sally Snyder. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the coordinator of the Rogue Community College Diversity Programming Board. And joining me today, we've got Jenny Jackson. She is a community member. We have not quite yet, but we'll have Reverend Ernestine Flemister joining us in a little bit when her internet is up and going, Reverend Tom Berry, and Reverend Ryan Scott. And we're just going to do our real quick intro. I think most of you are really familiar with this. Our mission is to enrich, support, and celebrate our diverse community by acting as a catalyst for inclusion, continuous learning, understanding, and acceptance through active engagement and facilitation of educational opportunities that challenge biases and deepen conversations. We've all been on Zoom for quite a while, so if you aren't speaking, please mute your microphone. Stay still, although if you're exercising or need to move around or something, just turn your camera off. Please do not eat on camera. Drinks are fine. And then if you want to join the conversation, if you can raise your Zoom hand, that's best. Usually it's at the bottom in reactions, but you can also, we'll be looking for you if you raise your real hand as well. And then our conversation ground rules, which are adapted from the Conversation Cafe. And this is so we can create a safe space where we can learn and share and grow. So if everyone keeps an open mind and listen to all points of view, be really curious. It's hard to do this, but suspend your judgment as best you can. Really open up your ears and your heart. Respect. So we're here not to push our own views on other people, but to listen and try to understand somebody else's point of view. So with that said, if you've got something in your head and you're not agreeing with somebody else, question that old assumption. Look for new insights. And brevity. Just say it. Don't go on and on and on. And we also are going to have an opportunity. We're going to stay in a big group today. We don't want people to feel singled out in a smaller group, so you can listen to the conversation, but if you want to jump in, we ask that you share your personal experience, your own story, and not somebody else's. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Well, hello, everyone. Those of you who don't know me, I think we're all repeat visitors here today, but I am Ryan Scott. I'm the pastor at Newman United Methodist Church here in Grants Pass, and I'm excited to be with you all today to talk about our topic, which is Pride and Prejudice today. I think you've probably noticed by now, if this isn't your first time, that we spend a lot of time here at Courageous Conversations talking about history. And we've had Miss Mack here a few times to really dive in on a few topics, and it seems like we always have some sort of history component to our conversations. So I wanted to start by posing the question, why do we start with the history? And it's rhetorical. I'm not really looking for answers right now, but if you want to dive more into that question, we can talk about it later. Personally, I think history is very important. The events of the past shape who we are today, and they can help us to better understand why things are the way they are. Growing up as a gay teen and young person, the only history that I remember learning about LGBTQ plus people was all about the AIDS crisis. So if our knowledge of history actually does shape us as people, consider that my only knowledge as a young gay person was that a bunch of people like me died from awful disease and no one did anything about it until thousands of people suffered and died. LGBTQ plus history is not taught in our schools, and it's often not talked about in general. You know, we're quick to celebrate Pride, yet we don't always have that deeper or common understanding of why Pride is needed in the first place. So to LGBTQ plus people, Pride is more than just a party. Pride is an exercise in personal liberation and agency. It's a way for us to subvert the social and cultural norms around gender identity and sexual orientation. And for many of us, it's the only chance we get at being our most true and authentic selves. So again, Pride is not just a party. It's a tether to our most honest selves. Because let's face it, most of the time LGBTQ plus people cannot be their most honest selves. If I'm being honest here, there's only really two places in my life where I feel like I can be my most authentic self. Number one is at home with my close friends and family. And number two is at my church, which I know is not the case for many people. And even at those two spaces, I still find myself occasionally policing my behaviors and what I say. And all this is why we start with history. Because when we seek to better understand the world and the people around us, we can better love and support those people. And when young LGBTQ plus people are exposed to the history of the queer liberation movement, it can be liberating for themselves. It was certainly liberating for me to learn about the LGBTQ pioneers who came before me. It showed me that I was not alone, that things are getting better, and that my identity as a gay person is not something that I need to be ashamed of. So with that somewhat long introduction, I want to dive into some of the history, beginning with the Stonewall Riots. Now, the queer liberation movement as we know it can be traced back to that 1969 Stonewall uprising on Christopher Street in New York City. The uprising began shortly after midnight on June 28th, when the New York Police Department's Public Morals Squad, right, the Public Morals Squad, it's a defunct agency of the police department now, but there are similar agencies in many police departments around the country that are still active today. So the Public Morals Squad raided the bar, and they ordered about 200 people to line up to show their identification, and some were even asked to submit to anatomical inspections. Witnesses say the police slammed people against the walls, spit on them, hurled insults at them, and beat them. And what's sad about this is what happened at Stonewall wasn't some unique event. In the 1960s, these types of raids at gay establishments happened all the time. They were routine. And to this day, there are still queer establishments that are targeted by police officers in many cities. And throughout history, and we've talked about this before here at Courageous Conversations, but in particular in America, police brutality has been a tool to squelch anyone who has thought to be divergent from the social norms and to assert power over groups of people who are not straight white men. And most of the revulsion towards LGBTQ people actually came from the teachings of the Christian church. And as a leader in the Christian church myself, I've had to wrestle with that and our history as a movement. So I want to take just a quick little side trip from Stonewall to address that. And Sally, there's no slide that corresponds to this, so don't worry, you're not falling behind on slides or anything. There were many early theologians in the Christian church who were vehemently opposed to same-sex relationships, despite it being fairly normal in Greek and Roman culture. But the church did evolve over time, and there were actually, you can go back and look at some of these old libraries, there are rites of Christian marriage in the 11th through the 18th century, including the Byzantine emperor Basil I and his partner John. These were Christian rites of marriage that were celebrated by the church in the 11th through the 18th century. And then the church evolved again and went back to being a little more conservative. So it's not some static issue where the church has always been opposed to homosexual or same-sex marriages. It has evolved over time, and the church has kind of gone back and forth. But American Christianity and Catholic Christianity has doubled down the past few centuries. And in the 1960s, we had a movement of Protestant churches, and that movement is still continuing, where these churches have become more positive and more affirming. I know that Bethany Presbyterian and St. Luke's Episcopal and the Unitarians here in town and Newman Methodist and a few others out there are moving in a more affirming and positive direction. So that's just my little aside there on a bit of the church history. We could talk about that forever. But I want to kind of jump back to Stonewall now. And Sally, we can move to the Marsha P. Johnson slide, which I believe is the next one. Stonewall really became the catalyst for the queer liberation movement thanks to a group of transgender women of color led by none other than the fabulous Marsha P. Johnson. And you can see her famous quote there, "I got my civil rights." That's what she was known. She was heard to have yelled that as she threw a shot glass at the wall of Stonewall and broke it out of frustration for the police raid that had happened the night before. Out of her rage and frustration, this movement and this uprising was born. It's often called the shot glass heard around the world. But so many of the details around those early days of the Stonewall Riots are unknown because there hasn't been any kind of systemic willingness to capture history until recently. All too often, LGBTQ history has historically been ignored. It hasn't been written down, it hasn't been categorized and analyzed. It's just been passed down through generations through stories and rumors spread among the community itself. I want to move on to another key figure in the movement, and that is Brenda Howard. She is known as the mother of Pride, and she is a key figure in making the first ever Pride March happen in 1970, 1 year after the Stonewall Riots. She felt that the word pride was important, and she's the one that chose that word that we all use now, because LGBTQ people frequently found themselves demoralized and rejected in society. And she felt that the community needed a sense of pride, a sense of worthiness, a sense that we belong. And so the modern day Pride movement began. The movement often worked in tandem with the women's liberation movement and with the civil rights movement. And to this day, Pride marches continue around the world, and there's now ongoing debate over, that, like I talked about in the beginning, that Pride is just a party as a corporate, a way to corporatize Pride versus the radical roots of Pride as a protest. In some ways, I think this last couple of years, we've regained some of the protest aspects of Pride. And certainly there is a need for it today in this day and age. There are still high rates of LGBTQ or crimes against LGBTQ people, specifically trans women. There is certainly a continued need for pride in today's world. And just a real quick side note here, I wanted to mention that there are Pride events happening here in Southern Oregon this year. And the next one coming up is in Cave Junction. I believe it's this weekend. I might try to find more details on that to share with y'all before we leave today. But I just felt it was really important that there is a Pride event happening in Cave Junction of all places this year, and I'm excited about that. So Pride is still needed because LGBTQ people still face that continued isolation. And in the past, we've talked about generational trauma, right? Specifically in regards to racism and how trauma can be passed down throughout multiple generations of people. And the same thing can be true for a community of people like the LGBTQ community. There's this trauma that's been passed down over years. Young LGBTQ people growing up today hear the stories of how previous generations were treated, and then there's that internalized sense of fear and otherness that we all have. So with that, I think we want to open up the conversation to all of you. And I believe, Tom, you had some prompts for us to start off our conversation.
And I'm going to pop in just for a second because I was pulling up some flyers, Ryan, for some events. So let's see, pull this up. So June 25th is Friday. And if you would like any of these flyers, please email me or private message me right now, and I can give me your email address and I can get this to you. And let's see if I've got the other one showing. This, I think, is the Cave Junction one. Is that showing now? Somebody's gonna have to tell me yes, because I can't see you.
Yes.
Yes. Great, thank you. Okay, there's the June 26th. Okay, Tom, sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. And can you hear me okay? I'm having trouble with my. Yeah, no?
No.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, there, we can hear you now.
I'm having trouble with all my headsets and stuff, and I don't want to be that guy that's just using my computer microphone and getting all the background static noise. But I guess I'm going to have to be that guy today because everything else I try is not working. So I guess what I wanted to start us off with and throw that out to y'all is a question that I wrestle with a lot myself. And what does it mean to be an ally? You know, for those of us, and again, speaking for myself, who identifies as a middle-aged, middle-class, straight white male, what does that mean for me to be an ally? And I'm going to leave it at that. I have lots of things to share. I'm a minister. I can preach for hours, but I'm throwing that back out to you all. If anyone feels comfortable either sharing what they think that means, or if this is a safe place to ask, what do you think that means? And now I'll be quiet.
I can chime in. Or no, I see Blair has raised their hand. I can chime in if it's silent for too long. So Blair, please take it away.
Hi, I'm Blair. I am a trans gay person in a polyamorous relationship with people of multiple genders. And I think being a ally, one, it definitely is know when to be silent and let those who experience speak their experiences. And y'all are doing great. So I'm not trying to like feel like that's a big thing, a problem here, but no. That's one of the most important because a lot of allies will try to speak over experiences that are trying to be shared by people who've experienced them. And then mostly it's vote for change, be a part of change. We need bodies at events that create change. You don't have to be loud and overcorrect, but you do have to be present and there and help us make the change that we need to make. It's, I don't want to bring like another issue, but when racism happens around you, as a white person, we have a responsibility to speak out against it because no one's going to listen to the person who is experiencing it by the person who is doing it. We need cis white males to say, no, I'm actually cool with this. It's not just the gays fighting for this. It's human rights. It's all humans involved. So that's my 2 cents on what it means to be an ally.
Thank you for sharing. My screen is very small. I'm busily looking for hands. So whether that's the hand that pops up or if you want to just wave your own hand.
Anne, go ahead, please. Thanks.
So I had an interesting experience yesterday where it was pointed out to me that I had not been an ally in a conversation. But it was done so gently. The way that I was made aware of this was done so gently that I was in a meeting, and so I just pondered and finally got it. So I think part of being an ally for me means paying attention, for goodness sakes. Like, because there were multiple subjects in the same conversation, and by the time we got to the part where it would have been good for me to speak up, I didn't. And so I'm taking that real seriously, really seriously, because so that's all I'll say. It's important for me to have that experience and to change my behavior.
If I might speak out about something real quick. I know I already had my time.
Go ahead, please.
There was a really beautiful moment of allyship where at Ryan's church, actually, we were experiencing some hatred from outsiders, and the person who I was talking to is a straight white female married to a straight white man, and she said that for them it was eye-opening as allies because they were receiving the same hate as us, just being with us. And for them to finally understand, like, this is something that gay and trans people go through sometimes on a daily basis, this animosity. So for them to get like a small taste of it was just, oh, this is why we fight. So I just thought I'd throw that out there of like the experiences of an ally. Once you're an ally with us, you tend to start experiencing those things with us, and it bonds us all together as humans.
Jenny.
I think that makes the perfect time for me to chime in, unless someone was ahead of me. I'm having some tech, but I'm back online. Blair, I really hear what you're saying. I'm a part of this group, and we have conversations, courageous conversations before our courageous conversations. And I think me as an ally was marching in the Boatneck Parade with the Rainbow Club as the supporter for the club advisor. I've marched in it the last 2 years, not this recent year, but 2 years previous before. And it was incredibly eye-opening for me. The hatred and the stares and the glares and the assumptions that people made really hit home. And you can't tell on me, but I'm almost 6 foot tall, and I carry a presence. And one of the things I did to know that was to walk back up 6th Street by myself and just kind of look people in the eye. And I saw people recognizing me and judging me, and it was very different than it has been at Rogue Community College or in environments where people are kind and supportive and it's safe. Oh.
I'm not sure if that was an about the experience or about the
Jenny,
about her
you
internet
froze.
connection. We've lost you, Jenny.
I would also like to add at that parade though, so because 3 years ago, there was a lot more negative response from our community to RCC's Rainbow Club going down 6th Street. And then 2 years ago, we had a lot of cheering people. We had a lot of people who were really supportive of us. I mean, there was a big change. Not everyone, but there was still a lot. And I had, I was giving out our stickers. I've got one, look, I've got one right here. Little Rainbow Club sticker, and people were coming up, do you have more of those? Can we have some more? And so that was very encouraging to see that change.
Jenny, you're back. Did you want to finish?
I see I disappeared. How much did y'all hear?
You were staring people in the eye as they were staring you back in a not so pleasant way.
Your last exclamation was "arg," something like that.
And frozen again.
That would be the internet. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to get on my phone too. Maybe I'll just stay there if I do come back. So I apologize for my internet issues, but I am an ally and I stand with you.
Anyone else like to share? I have something to share, but again, Ryan, how are we doing for time? And I don't need to share, so I don't want to take anyone else's space.
I think we're okay on time. It's, I think we're doing pretty good. So feel free to share, Tom.
Okay. Well, as Jenny mentioned, this group that we have formed, this Courageous Conversations group, which has courageous conversations in prep for Courageous Conversations I'll just speak for myself, but has just been a wonderful group of people to work with and to prepare for these. And I think as I was thinking about what it means for me to be an ally, the first thing that I've learned over the years is there has to be humility and there has to be a willingness to listen. And when you listen, to do listening well, you really can't talk at the same time. And so again, as a white male in the United States, raised that every problem can be fixed, and you can, if you're really a man, you're going to take care of these things and fix them, and that's the right thing to do. And there's some truth to that, but there's also a lot of problems with that mentality. When you enter into somebody else's pain or experience or a project they're working on, and you have little to no background yourself, but feel that you are eminently qualified to save everybody and fix everything, that's a lesson that is learned over and over again. At least I will again claim that for myself. I had friends when I was young that when I was in elementary school and middle school and junior high school. So we're talking back in the late 70s, early 80s, that were gay, and I knew and they knew, but you didn't talk about it. And, and we were friends and we were supportive, but I would say still it was very easy. I mean, back in the day, just using, oh, that's so gay, and never thinking what that might have felt like to your friend when you use that as a negative, or just kind of that catch-all be-all, or when other people made jokes and you just kind of laughed or kind of didn't say anything. And so looking back and having to kind of go through that, but it wasn't until seminary, I believe, that I really started to understand what that meant. When I started to understand that I had colleagues in seminary that could preach me under the table and out the back door, that had skills that I just envied and wished I had and wished that I would bring into ministry. But I also knew that those colleagues were going to struggle to get jobs. And I was married, I had 2 kids and a cat. I knew I had a job. I knew as soon as I stepped out of seminary, churches were going to be looking for me. I was still young enough that I could do youth ministry and the deacons if you're a Presbyterian. And so that was the first eye opener to how are you an ally? How are you not willing just to be quiet and just do what works for you and not worry about what may not work for others. And so that set me on another path. And again, that kept reinforcing, listen, don't talk, don't do, but listen and ask, how can I be an ally? How can I be helpful? And I've had a lot of good conversations. What really brought it home, though, was having a conversation with my daughter, my youngest. I'm close with all my kids, but my youngest, very close. And I can't even remember the setting we were chatting in, but she somehow jokingly told me that I didn't have to worry about her getting pregnant in high school. And that was her way of opening that conversation of who she was and who she just who she was. And it wasn't surprising. It was, we smiled and the hard part was, as close as we were, she was still unsure about how to tell me that. She was still unsure about how that might turn out, even though she knew I loved her and nothing would change that. But she was, so again, that makes you reflect. Are you being the ally? Are you doing it as well as you think you're doing it? And I will wrap this up. But 2 things, I'm going to brag on my daughter. So for Father's Day, this is what I got from my daughter for Father's Day. And I'm proud of it because she knew giving it to me would make me smile. And just, so I got this. So I got my new mask. And then if you can see it right here, so those of you who know me know I do home brewing. And so that's the shirt I got from my daughter. And that just, that just makes me smile. As I said, 2 things for me right now. I know being an ally, one of the most important things I can do as a pastor is use that pulpit, use that. I don't have to go out of my way, to make people feel uncomfortable or just always be in their face. Maybe I do, but just the fact that I can just say that and in my preaching and in my teaching and in my talking and where I show up and who I hang out with. I know that as a pastor, we have a lot to make up for, because it seems there's a lot more out there who are not supportive than there are who are supportive. And my closing remark is from a comic named Mark Normand. And this has helped me when I've talked to parents who have asked me, well, what did you do when you found out? Or what should I do when when this happened? And Mark Normand had done a comedy routine, and someone came up after him and said, well, you're very supportive of the gays, but what would you do if you found out your son was gay? And he looked this person in the eye, as the story goes, and he said, well, if I found out my son was gay, it would be like finding a French fry in my order of onion rings. I wasn't expecting it, but I love those too. And I just thought, all right, there you go. It doesn't solve everything, but what a great place to start as a parent. And so that is the piece I'm learning. And after sharing all this right now, if anyone wants to call me on places I need to learn and grow, I am willing to learn and grow. So I will stop talking at that point.
Andrew, and then after that, Dorothy.
So good afternoon, everyone. Heavily resonating with this conversation, and I'm glad that Ryan, Sally, Tom, you facilitated it. A lot of what Tom said, as a straight white male who for over half of my life has had people of the LGBTQIA community coming up to me and trusting me and having these really positive relationships. And, I was content to let it stop there, but much, and please forgive me if I'm using this inappropriately, but I almost felt like, per what Tom said, as an ally, for members of the LGBTQIA community, coming out of the closet, as the metaphor goes, on their own terms is extremely crucial. I kind of had to do that in the ally version of that. And by that, I mean, not just resign to privately supporting it, but to do so openly and publicly as well. And so I think that I wholeheartedly agree with what Blair has said and what Tom has said as well. And in addition to that, just a couple of other things to add: the personal and the political. So for the political, I think that insofar as we can, the advocacy needs to go to the local, state, and governmental levels. Just being aware of crucial issues and legislation that could affect the LGBTQIA community, and advocating for that as much as we can, and insofar as we're capable of doing it. And this is something I've started to do recently with some better budgeting and stuff, like donating to causes here and there, just to show another form of solidarity and being willing to help. And last year I got my first not quite as cool as Tom's shirt, admittedly, but I also just have an Ally shirt that I thought about buying, and I ultimately decided to do it. And I've worn it publicly, even in places like Grants Pass, thinking that, well, firstly, I'm being aware of my privilege. I operate under the assumption that a lot of people won't talk to me anyway, but if they do, and it's about that, just having an opener to have productive conversations if it comes down to it. But what I've, while I was anticipating antipathy, I completely, woefully didn't take into account that there are a lot of people who were just so glad and complimentary. And, I remember wearing it visiting home, which I'm from Central Arkansas. So let's just say a lot of similarities between there and Grants Pass. And, just being out and about, and, I would find couples or people coming up to me and just thanking me, and it was just, I'm like, well, this is such a small thing that I could do. It doesn't hold a candle to what you have to go through, sort of like what Jenny was talking about, just being in a position where you have a sliver of all of the adversity. that LGBTQIA encounters. And, you know, I was just so taken aback. I'm like, this is, I feel like I wish I would have had the confidence to have done this earlier. Something just that basic goes such a long way. And that was really an important experience for me personally as well. Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity. And Dorothy.
All right, I have so many kind of thoughts and responses, and everything that people are saying is just resonating with me a whole lot. I was raised by a father who was bisexual, which I didn't learn until he was 73 years old. And he kept it a secret. He kept it an incredible secret most of his life. He was born in 1927, so definitely not very safe to come out back then. But I remember it was the year 2000 that he came out to me over the phone. And Tom, I just love that image of the French fry and the onion rings, because I never would have put it that way, but that was how I felt. Yeah, I loved you before and I love you now. And the last 6 years of his life, he lived in Grants Pass, and we got to have a richer and deeper relationship than we'd had at any point before then, because he was being real with me for the first time in our lives together. And it was really beautiful. I want to say one quick thing about allyship too, which is that for me, a lot of what being an ally is internal. It is taking a hard look at myself, and where some of my prejudices exist, even though I wish they weren't there. If I pretend they're not there, I'm not going to be any use to anybody. And so that kind of hard, honest look at myself and the internal process of dealing with that, so that it doesn't come up and surprise me when I'm in a situation and I don't want to have that baggage talking when I have something else I want to say. And I think too, just being prepared for it to be challenging. I think that it can sound kind of easy to be an ally, you know, show up and stand beside and smile and never say anything insulting. But if you do it deeply, it can be deeply challenging, and just to be prepared for that. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dorothy. Just to kind of tag on to what you were saying about what it means to be an ally and the work that goes into being an ally. I've kind of seen it both ways. I've seen people who are allies. I don't know, I call them baby allies. They're just stepping their toes in the water. They're accepting you and welcoming, but they haven't really done the real internal work of being an ally and really asking those deeper questions. Now, this has been true. I know I had to check before I said this in case my dad was on here. I didn't want to say something if he was in the room, and because he does pop in sometimes to these. But my parents, I was lucky they both accepted me when I came out to them. But it did take a little bit of time to really fully wrap their heads around it. I had no question in my mind that they loved me and cared for me and supported for me, but they didn't understand all the aspects of what it means to have a gay child or have a LGBTQ plus child. And I've seen parents of friends and family who have stayed at that level. They do the love and support and continue to care for the child, but they don't dig deeper. They just kind of, it's not really talked about, we love you, but we don't want to talk about it at Thanksgiving, kind of a thing. But what I really appreciate is my parents' willingness to learn and grow over time. I think that's key, is just that willingness to engage over time and continue to grow as a person. And for me, as an openly gay man, that's a mark of a true ally, is someone who's willing to learn and move and try. So even if they aren't getting everything right, if they're messing up on, pronouns or they say something a little sensitive, they're in that space of trying, I feel like we can have a conversation and grow and learn together. And I see Blair, your hand is raised again.
Yeah, but Marco might have had their hand raised before me.
Okay, we'll let Marco go first, and then you can, and then Nicole.
Thank you, y'all. Marco here. Beautiful stories, everyone. Encouraging to come out as allies. As it is something that I just wanted to echo in bringing everyone what that Andrew said and that Tom said is coming out, especially coming out as a gay person, is a process. And we have that internal discussion with ourselves, discussion with friends, families, and whatnot. So when we finally come out, being part of the community, you know, we want to celebrate your stance as coming out as an ally as well, because it's overlooked sometimes, that allyship that we can take for granted as part of a member of the community. So we really do encourage you to celebrate your coming out experience as well as an ally, because as Andrew kind of pointed it out a little bit, sometimes we don't know what atmosphere we might be in. So we might be cautious of, do I bring up my allyship here or do I not bring up my allyship here? And as a member within the queer community, I always bring out my gayness in wherever situation I may be. But I'm always encouraging people to understand, you know, where you are in your level of comfort in terms of your allyship. So I'm proud, and I thank you all for also coming out as allies, for those who shared and for those who are have not said it publicly, but I know that y'all do it in your prospective works. So that's all I wanted to share.
Was it Nicole next and then Blair, or what was our?
I think it was Blair, then Nicole. And
Okay.
thank you, Marco.
I think it's definitely important what Marco said about celebrating allies coming out as well. As Jenny sort of said, you have no idea what you are opening yourself up to just by wearing a gay pride t-shirt. I'm glad things are a lot better, but I knew that I was gay since I was 6 years old. I liked girls. I knew this. I couldn't tell people. I knew that, like, my family loved me and would be accepting, but it was still really hard to face that. So all my relationships up until about 25 years were private, were secret. I was gay to anyone who knew me, but publicly on Facebook and stuff like that, no. I did not have the bravery at that time. And then when I did come out, when I started holding my girlfriend's hand in public, it was like my closeted world was ripped open. I've had situations where police have had to be called to remove women from the premises of my place of work because they were screaming at me because they identified me as a trans and gay person. So just, you guys have your own strength as allies for coming out and standing with us, and it is appreciated. And it may not be for everyone right away. Sometimes we have to deal with our own internalized perceptions of things. Even as a gay person myself, I did not understand the full gay experience because I was still closeted and hidden for most of mine. I didn't understand how much being public would affect. And I'm sure that there are a lot of allies as well who don't understand until they're out there joining us. So thank you. It's a brave thing. It is. And until it's not a brave thing anymore, then we need to celebrate it.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. I believe Nicole was next, and then Ernestine after Nicole.
Thank you all for everything you shared. I'm not sure that I have anything new completely to share, but I really appreciate the folks talking about baby allyship and the coming out process, because both happen as processes. And I was a queer youth, and I didn't know it, but you know, in retrospect, all of my friends in high school were queer. We all came out like in our 20s, and then, you know, a decade later, we look back and we're like, oh, is that why we all hung out together? Oh, but the personal process of the internalized process of homophobia and queerphobia, and that we all are kind of living in and can get baked into our psyches, regardless of whether we personally are LGBTQ, or whether we are straight, heteronormative, cisgendered. It's like this milieu that we all live in, like this big ocean of phobia and sometimes hatred that I feel like I have to work on myself in my sort of coming out process, and there's different plateaus to it where I'm like, oh, is this a safe place? Am I going to risk my professional, you know, relationships with others if I come out here? And is this a safe place? Am I going to risk personal relationships here? How important is it? And compared to the rest of what may be at risk. But I also witnessed it, much like Ryan was saying, with my dad, where he asked me about a month ago, due to some issues that were happening in Grants Pass. He asked me, like, what is LGBTQ? He asked me to walk him through the rainbow. And I did. And we literally talked for about an hour and a half about the letters. And there were certain points where he couldn't get past a couple of the letters, and we had to like use metaphors to explain it. And but like Ryan was saying, I was just so touched that he asked, you know, that he was concerned and didn't understand and couldn't get past some of the letters, but at least wanted to. So I think some of being an ally is also taking that time to hold each other's hands as we walk through whatever process we're in.
Thank you, Nicole. Ernestine.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I think for me, the whole process, and I think for a lot of people assume that because I'm African American, that I'm automatically homophobic or anti-LGBTQ people, because that's the reputation that's out there about African Americans. And I think it may be true in some instances, but that is not part of my tradition. And I think for me, I agree with everybody that it is a process. And I think for me, a lot of education has come from my daughter and my nieces, who have really kind of kept us, my sister and I, up on the conversation and on the ongoing changes, especially in the trans community, and how violence against trans women, especially trans women of African American descent, I should say, of African American descent, have been on the uptick for a while. And so we have conversations around it, and where they see that we may be not so informed, or we may be not up to date on what we're doing, we get challenged, and we have the conversations, and we keep growing. And I appreciate the process, and I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate all of you here today who are being so brave and courageous in sharing your stories. And I just will try to continue to grow, and definitely continue to support you. And I agree with Tom that I think, and Ryan, that the church has played a big role in how society treats LGBTQ people. And we are responsible, I think, for, in our preaching and our teaching, to try to draw back the curtain on some of those homophobic and anti-perceptions that we have as the church. And I say this all the time, that the Pew study comes out every year, and the church is losing people more and more. People are not affiliating with any religious group. More people are becoming nuns. And I think a part of that is because we preach, we say we believe in love and we preach love, but we don't actually practice love. And so I think it's up to us to really live into what we say we believe in, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and welcome, as you were saying, Andrew, in the chat, that all means all. You know, we don't get to decide that, okay, all means you and not you. And so I think it's as pastors and priests, it's part of our responsibility to preach that and to practice that. And so thank you all for being here today. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernestine. I see, Blair, you have your hand up again. Feel free to speak.
Promise this one will hopefully be quick. Just when we're talking about being an ally, one thing that I wanted to bring up was a lot of you guys have mentioned having questions, and a lot of us in the community have talked about having to explain it to parents or friends or other things. And just keep in mind that sometimes a person who is trans or gay may not have the energy to teach and educate. It's been a thing. I'm gender neutral, and that's kind of a complicated subject. I'm also asexual and panromantic. And these are a lot of terms that I'm throwing out here that may not be understood by every ally. So they want answers. And it's sometimes not easy to explain it to every new person what all that means. So just keep that in mind, that if they don't have an answer for you, or they don't want to talk about it, it's not that they don't want you to be educated or that they're trying to shut you out. It is just a little exhausting to explain all that to every new person.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. And we've all got Google, right? It's not, as LGBTQ plus people, it's not our responsibility to educate you. I mean, we are often more than willing to assist in that, but it's not our responsibility. It's ultimately your responsibility as an ally to do that. And there are some great resources that Sally and I have shared in the chat for being a good ally. And with that, I'm going to let Nicole speak.
Oh, I just wanted to echo that, Blair. Thank you for mentioning that. When it is exhausting. And I only did that hour and a half because it was my dad. But I do want to bring up allyship at a different level, which is at the one that I think Andrew maybe touched on, which is the advocacy piece, because Ryan talked about how we don't have a history that is taught or necessarily written down or collated. There's some opportunities for those who want to be active allies to really advocate for education, and to advocate for policy, and to advocate for inclusivity and representation, and a lot of different things in your own neighborhood, in this community here, such that you do take the burden off of the folks who are both living the brunt of discrimination and be a very active ally. So I really encourage that.
Irini's hand up. Irini, is your hand up? Oh, okay. Ryan, if I could jump in really quick, I'm looking for other hands, but I know we're getting near the end here. There's a couple things that I've been listening that I wanted to just kind of, I guess, echo and also throw out there. But bragging on my daughter and the T-shirt that she gave me and the mask, and those are, I say this between her and I, those are fun things, and I have other shirts and things like that, and I also have to realize though that those are great starting places. And it was nice to hear from other folks today about, how, starting out or coming out as an ally or starting out with baby steps, because I think that's the other piece too for us who are learning, who are trying to do this and do this right, that maybe wearing my ally shirt to the brewery might cause a stir, or it might not. I might wear it for 2 days and no one says anything to me, for whatever reason. So it's a fun shirt. It's nice. It's a good start, but I also have to remind myself too that that's wearing a T-shirt doesn't make me an ally. So finding those places, and I have a very twisted sense of humor with a lot of sarcasm, and that's how I was raised, and that's how my children were raised. So my daughter and I don't ask her to explain everything to me. But we do start a lot of our conversations. I will look at her with a smile and say, knowing that you represent every lesbian on the planet, could you please explain this to me? And she knows that I'm being sarcastic with her. But that's part of the next step. And I won't tell you what she usually says in response to that. But for us wanting to be allies, not expecting everybody we know who's LGBTQ to educate us, but also we do need to put ourselves into places where we have friends who are, because we can't just do it by reading. I mean, we can go to the websites, we can do all that, but I think we also need to, and that goes with the not talking so much and listening and asking. But you can only go so far on the website or with the reading a pamphlet or something like that. So again, having these kind of discussions and making connections, I feel is very important as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I know we had hoped to talk a little bit about pronouns and why those are important. I posted a link in the chat. I encourage you all to go check that out if you're unfamiliar at all with the use of pronouns. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about it now. I know we are coming up on our hour. This just goes to show that we have lots to talk about and can continue to engage together as a community of people. Sally, do you want to go ahead and share our upcoming event, our next one?
Okay, so I'm going to say there's so much I could say too. And Blair, thank you for sharing. Don't worry about speaking up too much. I tried to keep myself quiet because I have way too many stories. And with that, I am somebody, if you would like to ask more questions, my email, I'll put it in the chat in just a moment. Please feel free to reach out to me and we can have one-on-one conversation unrecorded. Next month, we are going to be talking about patriotism and polarity. Especially in this last year, we have seen people really, if you fly the flag, that means something, or it doesn't. And only certain people can fly the flag and have it mean that you are, love the country. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And we are fourth Tuesdays, so July 27th, noon to 1. And I've had so many little stories I was going to share, but I'm going to open it up if anybody else has anything they would like to say before we wrap up. So I'm going to give an official thank you for coming. I'm going to turn off the recording, but we're going to stay here for a few minutes if anybody else would like to hang around.